A banker denies a poor man a loan, but when he sees it's Elon Musk, his career ends. The air inside the bank was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the bustling city streets outside. A man dressed in tattered clothes stepped through the glass doors, his shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the world. His face was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but his eyes burned with quiet determination. The bank teller barely glanced up from her screen. Next, she called in a bored voice. The man approached the counter, holding a worn leather bag clutched tightly to his chest. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'd like to apply for a small business loan." The teller raised an eyebrow, taking in the man's ragged appearance. She fought back a smirk. "I see. Do you have an appointment?" "No," the man admitted, "but I believe I can explain my situation to the bank manager." The teller hesitated, glancing at the security guard by the door. "Wait here," she said with a thin smile before disappearing into the back office. Moments later, the bank manager, a tall man with a perfectly pressed suit and an air of self-importance, strode out with a clipboard in hand. His eyes scanned the room until they locked on the ragged figure standing by the counter. "You're the one asking for a loan?" the manager asked, his tone dripping with condescension. The man nodded. "Yes." "It's for an important project?" The manager chuckled, shaking his head. "Let me stop you right there. We don't give out loans to just anyone who walks in off the street, especially not to someone who looks like this." The man's eyes narrowed. "I assure you, my credentials will speak for themselves." But the manager waved him off. "I've seen your type before. Wild ideas, big dreams, but no means to back them up. We're a serious institution. We don't have time for fairy tales." The man stood his ground, his expression calm despite the dismissive words thrown at him. His hand tightened around the worn strap of his leather bag as the bank manager glanced at him with visible disdain. "Sir," the manager said, barely holding back a sneer. "We deal with established clients, individuals with proven credit history, stable incomes, and tangible assets." "Well, you don't fit the profile." The man smiled faintly, unfazed. "I understand your concerns. But perhaps you should at least hear my proposal before you make assumptions." The bank manager chuckled, folding his arms. "You want me to waste my time listening to some fantasy pitch about how you're going to build the next big thing? Spare me the story, will you?" The other bank employees, overhearing the conversation, exchanged amused glances. One of them leaned over to a colleague, whispering, "This guy looks like he's been living on the streets for months. What does he expect?" The man's eyes flickered briefly toward the whispering employees, but he quickly returned his focus to the manager. His voice remained calm and steady. "I believe in giving people a fair chance. Sometimes, appearances can be deceiving." The manager raised a brow, tapping his fingers against the counter. "Fair chance? Life isn't a charity, and neither is this bank. We're here to make profits, not gamble on pipe dreams." The man exhaled slowly, reaching into his leather bag and pulling out a folded document. "If you read this," he said, "you'll see that I've already laid the groundwork for something that could be incredibly successful. I just need a modest loan to bring it to life." The manager snatched the document and scanned it, his smirk growing with each passing second. "You expect me to believe this? It's a handwritten plan, barely legible in places, and there are no financial projections. Not to mention, you haven't provided any collateral." He tossed the paper back onto the counter. No bank in their right mind would approve this. For the first time, the man's expression hardened. He picked up the document and carefully returned it to his bag. His eyes locked onto the manager's. "Are you sure about that?" he asked, his tone now holding a subtle edge. The manager scoffed. "Absolutely." "Well," the man said, his voice dropping to a quieter, more deliberate tone, "perhaps you should know who you're speaking to." A few nearby employees stopped what they were doing, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. The man straightened his posture and removed his wide-brimmed hat, revealing his face more clearly. Whispers rippled through the bank like a wave. "Wait a second," one employee said, their voice rising in shock. "Is that?" The manager's eyes widened as recognition dawned on him. His face flushed with panic as he realized who was standing before him. It wasn't just any random stranger off the street. It was Elon Musk. The room fell into a stunned silence. The manager's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, his confidence draining away in an instant. "Mr. Musk," he stammered. "I didn't recognize you. I thought—" Elon raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "You thought I was just some nobody, unworthy of your time?" he said calmly. "But here's the thing. Every great idea starts as a dream. Every successful business begins with someone willing to take a chance." The employees around the room looked on, wide-eyed, as the scene unfolded. Elon leaned in slightly, his voice steady but firm. "The real test of leadership is recognizing potential where others see none. You failed that test today." The manager's face turned bright red. "Mr. Musk, I assure you, this was a misunderstanding. If I had known who you were—" "That's precisely the problem," Elon interrupted. "You were only willing to listen once you knew my name. How many other people have you dismissed simply because they didn't fit your narrow definition of worthy?" The manager stammered, his face a mixture of embarrassment and fear. He was a man who prided himself on his ability to make swift decisions, and here he was, caught in his own assumptions. His career was built on the idea of efficiency, but now, standing in front of one of the most influential men in the world, he realized just how much he had misunderstood. "I apologize, Mr. Musk. Truly, this was a mistake," the manager said, his voice faltering as he struggled to regain his composure. "I didn't mean to offend you." Elon Musk, however, wasn't looking for an apology. He wasn't interested in playing the game of power dynamics that the bank manager was so accustomed to. He simply nodded, his eyes unwavering as he surveyed the man before him. "You should have asked the right questions before jumping to conclusions," Elon said calmly. "But the real question is, are you willing to learn from this?" The manager's eyes darted nervously as he nodded, trying to save face. "Of course, Mr. Musk. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Elon took a step back, crossing his arms. "You don't owe me an apology. What you owe is a change in perspective. That's something I can help you with." The employees surrounding them were still silent, watching the interaction unfold. Some looked on in awe, others in disbelief. The scene was surreal, as if the lines between the powerful and the powerless were suddenly erased. Elon turned slightly, addressing the group. "Look, we all make mistakes. The difference is how we handle them. You could keep making the same assumptions, passing over the next big idea simply because it doesn't fit your criteria. Or, you could open your mind and give people a chance." One of the employees, a young woman who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "Mr. Musk, I think we all can agree that we've made mistakes, myself included. But how do we start changing this?" Elon smiled, a small but genuine expression. "Start by seeing people, not their circumstances. The man sitting in front of you in this very moment has as much potential as anyone else in this room. Never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book might change the world." The silence in the room lingered, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with reflection, with the understanding that something significant had just happened. The manager, now fully aware of the weight of the situation, stood frozen, his earlier arrogance gone. "I see now," the manager said softly, his voice humble. "I misjudged you, Mr. Musk. I see it now." Elon nodded, accepting the apology but not dwelling on it. "Don't dwell on it. Just learn from it." He looked over at the young man sitting at the desk, the one who had been quiet through the exchange, his eyes filled with a mix of uncertainty and hope. "You," Elon said, directing his attention to him. "Your idea is worth investing in. Not because of who you are, but because of what it can become. You deserve the chance to prove yourself." The young man, still taken aback by the entire situation, could barely form words. "Thank you, Mr. Musk. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Elon replied, smiling warmly. "Let your actions speak louder than words." The manager, now in full acknowledgement of the change in the room, finally broke the silence. "I'll make the arrangements. You'll get the loan, no questions asked." Elon turned to leave, but before he stepped out, he paused and glanced back at the room. "Remember, it's not about who's sitting in front of you. It's about what they can offer. I don't care where you come from, but I care about where you're going." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving a trail of stunned silence behind him. The employees looked at each other, some unsure of what had just transpired, but all silently agreeing on one thing. They had just witnessed a moment of transformation. The young man, his heart racing, couldn't believe what had just happened. His mind was still reeling from the interaction. He had been dismissed countless times before, his ideas laughed at and brushed aside. But this time, someone had believed in him. He looked around at the employees in the room, some of whom had been part of the earlier mocking. They too were processing the shift, and slowly, the atmosphere in the room began to change. What had once felt like an impenetrable fortress of privilege was now a space for possibility. The manager, now with a much more humble demeanor, stepped forward. "I apologize once again," he said to the young man. "You're right. I didn't see your potential before, but I will now. I'll make sure we get this process moving for you." The young man stood up, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance." As the young man left the room, he walked with newfound confidence. He didn't know where this opportunity would take him, but for the first time, he felt like he had a real chance to make a difference. Elon Musk's visit had done more than just secure him alone. It had changed the way he saw the world and how he would approach every challenge from that moment forward. He wasn't just a poor man anymore. He was someone with a vision, someone who had earned a chance to succeed. And as he stepped out into the world, he knew that this moment, this simple yet profound encounter, was the beginning of something greater. It was the start of a new chapter, one that would redefine not just his life, but perhaps the lives of many others. The banker, initially proud of his position, stood behind his polished desk. His fingers were still curled around the pen that he had used to dismiss Elon Musk's loan application. The poor man in front of him, dressed in tattered clothes, had appeared out of nowhere, seemingly unimportant. The banker couldn't help but sneer at the man's appearance as he handed over the rejection letter. "You've come to the wrong place," the banker had said with a dismissive tone, looking at Elon as if he were an inconvenience. "We don't give loans to people like you. You should know your place." Elon Musk, without flinching or reacting to the banker's words, quietly placed the rejection letter on the desk. His expression was unreadable, calm. The banker, too busy basking in the power of his position, didn't realize the magnitude of what was happening. But then came the turn that none could have anticipated. Elon Musk reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, the same phone he'd used to negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals, and tapped in a quick message. The banker didn't see it at first, too absorbed in his self-satisfaction. But the sudden shift in energy made him pause, as though the air itself had thickened. "Wait, what are you doing?" the banker asked, a trace of confusion slipping into his voice. "You can't just—" Before the banker could finish, the door to the office opened without warning, and in walked a well-dressed woman with an air of authority. She carried herself with the confidence that only someone with immense power could possess. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, looking directly at the banker, her sharp eyes assessing the situation. The man, taken aback, started to stammer. I was just, there was this man, and he was asking for a loan, and..." The woman turned her gaze towards Elon, who stood there quietly, as if he had not been a part of the conversation until now. "Mr. Musk," she said with a warm smile, her voice dropping a level as if speaking directly to someone who was both familiar and respected. "We've been waiting for you." The banker's face turned pale. His words stumbled in his mouth. "Mr. Musk? You mean, this is Elon Musk?" The Elon Musk? Elon's smile was serene, yet his eyes held a certain gravity that made the room feel smaller, quieter. He had not been hiding his identity for any reason other than to show how easily people could be deceived by appearances. The woman gestured toward the chair across from the banker's desk. "Please, Mr. Musk, have a seat," she said, her tone now entirely different, one of respect and even admiration. The banker, having just realized the gravity of his mistake, stood frozen in place, struggling to form any coherent thoughts. "How could I help you today, Mr. Musk?" the banker finally stuttered, attempting to regain his composure but failing miserably. It was as though the whole office had shifted into a completely different reality. The man who had been dismissed as unworthy only moments ago was suddenly at the center of the room's focus. Elon Musk leaned in slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "I just wanted to see how far someone like you would go to turn down an opportunity," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. The woman standing beside Elon Musk shot the banker a cold look before turning back to Elon. "Our company has decided to offer you the loan, Mr. Musk, and more. Everything you need for your upcoming ventures." The banker's jaw dropped. "You want to give him a loan?" he asked, incredulous, his hands shaking as he reached for the paperwork on his desk, his mind reeling with the realization of what was happening. "But he's just a homeless man?" Elon interrupted, his voice colder now. "That's what you thought, right? A man in worn clothes with no apparent value to offer. Well, I'm sure you've seen this before, haven't you?" The banker had no words left. He was caught in a whirlwind of his own making. The reality of his mistake was dawning on him, and the weight of his arrogance settled on his shoulders. The woman standing next to Elon Musk, who had quietly observed the exchange, took a few steps forward and addressed him. "Mr. Musk is the kind of person who understands the value of opportunity, no matter the appearance. It's people like him who see things others cannot. They look beyond the surface to what's underneath. You have no idea who you were talking to." The banker, now drenched in sweat, couldn't meet her gaze. His career, his reputation, were all on the line now. In the world of finance, where reputation was everything, a mistake of this magnitude could have far-reaching consequences. What should I do now?" the banker asked, his voice barely audible. His confidence had dissolved completely. Elon Musk's smile softened, and he glanced at the woman next to him before speaking again. "You'll need to reevaluate your entire approach to people, my friend," Elon said. "You see, there's something that people like you fail to understand. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing or how much money they have in their pockets. You judged me based on an appearance. You lost before you even began." The banker could barely process what was happening. He had underestimated the wrong person, and now, the very institution he represented would suffer for it. The woman beside Elon Musk handed the banker a card. "I would suggest you look into some additional training on empathy and understanding. You may want to look into finding a new place for yourself in this company." Elon Musk stood up and turned to leave, the woman following closely behind him. As they reached the door, the banker's voice shook as he asked, "Mr. Musk, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this?" Elon Musk didn't turn back. "Sometimes people need a wake-up call," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "Maybe you'll get yours today." As the door closed behind them, the banker sat down, his mind racing. He had just lost everything. His arrogance, his lack of understanding, had cost him far more than he could ever have imagined. Elon Musk had done more than just reject the loan. He had shown him the true nature of success, the importance of humility, and the dangers of underestimating someone based on appearances. Outside the office, Elon Musk smiled softly to himself. "It's never about how much money you have," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's about who you are and how you treat others."